The Democratic Party has tried to market itself as the champion of civil rights, as the champion of the downtrodden, those that have been discriminated of simply because of the color of their skin. And the problem with this is when you look at history, it turns out not to be true. And when you look at it in modern times, well, it looks like it turns out not to be true either. In this article here by Jeff Charles via Liberty Nation, he has written, Penn professors confirm left's worst fears. Racism plummeted after Trump's election. He starts out, the left isn't going to like this one. A recent study on racism in America has revealed some truths that directly contradict one of the progressives' most beloved narratives. The Democratic Party and its allies in the press have expended no small amount of effort over the past few decades to convince the American public that everyone who isn't a rabid lefty is a hateful racist. And we all know President Trump has become their favorite target. It's his policies, it's his rhetoric, it's his dog whistles, everything, the hats, the red hats, the OK symbol, which is just a business body language technique to point without pointing your finger at someone, taught in every business school that ever was. But they have now transformed it in their derangement, in their hallucinations, that this is somehow racism. Well, what does the science say? What does the research say? Well, at University of Pennsylvania, we find out that is not true. Racism has decreased under Trump. Sociologists Daniel J. Hopkins and Samantha Washington conducted a study to analyze the impact of Trump's election on prejudice against blacks and Hispanics. They used a panel of 2,500 Americans whose views on race and other matters has been documented since 2008. According to the report, the researchers expected to see an increase in racial prejudice because of Trump, because of the red hats, because of dog whistling, because the right has permanently been associated with racism, justified or not. Yes, it might be difficult to believe that professors at a major university would immediately assume that the president made the country more racist, but that's what they did. So they formed their hypothesis based on the idea that people have deep-seated racism lying dormant within themselves, waiting to be awakened by a provocative event. This is like a sleeper cell of terrorism or something. Now, if they have this hypothesis that we're all unconsciously racist, just waiting for the dog whistle to be sounded, and this supposed dog whistle has been sounded, and we become less racist, that means the hypothesis of unconscious racism is wrong. It's not real. It's fake. It's made to make you feel guilty. It's the old Catholic idea of indulgences where they make you feel guilty, you fork over your hard-earned cash, and you can buy your way into forgiveness. A very old trick. The theory was that Trump's election somehow pushed the magic "I'm totally racist" button that lurks in the hearts of men, probably white men, and transformed them into white supremacists. But the findings were the opposite. Between 2012 and 2016, racist attitudes had decreased by a small degree, but after 2016, when Trump was elected, racism plummeted. The drop was equally present in Republican voters and Democrats. So they have graphs here. You can see Republicans. There's Trump's election, and the so-called racist level, though I don't know exactly how they study that, is about where the Democrats were in 2009. So when you're calling a Republican a racist or the party of racists today, you're saying 10 short years ago, the Democratic Party was also the party of racists, which we all, thinking people, know this is all ridiculous. Here we have, this is anti-Hispanic attitudes. Republicans basically are at the same place Democrats were in 2009. Democrats have really taken a dive here. So, why the change? So, it is apparent that the findings of the study put the researchers and press in a quandary. How can they spin this that doesn't damage the narrative? Of course, right? You can't let go of that selling point because that's your party's primary appeal to low information voters. Instead of acknowledging America is not as racist as Al Sharpton wants us to think, researchers posit perhaps Trump's racism is so bad it made racist people want to be less racist, which is truly an amazing statement. Here the sociologist writes, "It is possible that Trump's rhetoric clarified anti-racist norms, given that the declines in prejudice appear concentrated in the period after Trump's election. It seems quite plausible that it was not simply Trump's rhetoric, but also his accession to the presidency that pushed public opinion in the opposite direction." The opposite direction of what? Of jobs, strong border, strong economy? I don't understand. The support when Trump has talked about at the State of the Union for building a border wall, the speech had 75% approval rating. Strong borders, strong economy, these are popular ideas. Any dog whistles that the left thinks are there, this data shows, are totally imagined. So the author goes on, if this doesn't make sense to you, congratulations, you're a normal person. But some on the left had another idea. The Spectator suggested the reason racism declined was that it had risen to such drastic heights when Obama was in office. Maybe social science has got it the wrong way round. It was the sight of a mixed-race man in the White House who brought out the inner racist in Americans. See, they are married to this idea that there is an inner racist in Americans who are inclined towards those feelings. Well, the reassuring sight of a white man in the Oval Office has calmed them down. Now, I don't need to do any analysis to explain to you that's a ridiculous idea. Just, it's interesting to look at the pretzel-like logical knots the left ties themselves into in order to continue their delusion and their hysteria. Perhaps it's possible both theories are wrong and a wee bit of common sense might be appropriate. And the reality is that the president does not have the power to make the country more or less racist. Now, I would suggest Donald Trump is not flying the right race flag all of the time, and there's this divide and conquer technique where if you can keep white Americans versus black Americans versus Mexicans and you can keep everybody at your throat, there's this real Machiavellian idea that they will be easier to control. And when you look at the history of the Democratic Party, it was the Republicans that fought the Civil War to end slavery. It was the Democrats that founded the KKK. It was the Democrats who tried to suppress black voting rights in the South after the Cruikshank decision and the Colfax massacre. The Republicans voted 80% for the Civil Rights Act, the Democrats in the 50% somewhere. And individuals like George C. Wallace, who did the much publicized stand in the school door to prevent integration, was a Democrat. He was in office until 1987. Joe Biden worked with these same segregationists to prevent busing that would have served to integrate American schools. Maybe it's not the Republican Party that has this deep, unconscious racism. Neither is it the right wing of politics. And so there's the assumption. And if there's any assumption that's going unchallenged by people on the left, I would say that it is that one. So the author finishes up, maybe the truth is that America's views on racial issues are continuing to evolve, and we are becoming gradually less racist every year, despite the far left's attempts to foment division between whites and minorities through its favored propaganda outlets. And maybe when we don't have anyone just continually stirring the pot, we all work together fairly well.